Okay. Here we go. So, so Ellen, I only see the slides in front of me, so I will be relying on you to tell me what's going on in the chat.
Sure, I'll answer the chats, folks that are here. I'll answer the chats either by writing back to you, or I will chime in and ask Tammy the questions that you have.
Great, thanks.
One question before you get started is, will you be willing to make your PowerPoint slides available to the people that came?
If they email me, I will be happy to do so.
Okay, so do you want the Gmail one or the
the information is that my email is at the end of this PowerPoint, so people can jot it down.
Great.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm sharing my screen. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. All right. So, so here we are in the middle of a pandemic. People are wondering how to network, how to connect with other people, even though we've all been connecting by Zoom, by phone. Maybe we've been reaching out to our family we haven't talked to in a while, all kinds of things. We're still finding ourselves, asking things like, well, how are you? And you can't just say fine these days. It's a different set of answers. When someone says, well, what are you doing this weekend? People are saying to each other, what weekend? Or how's it going? Or what are your plans this summer, right? So these are the kinds of things that also when you're networking or having, let's say, you start a new conversation with somebody, you usually have kind of a pat answer or a starter. And, in the midst of this pandemic, I think that most of us, or the recommendation is that we give an answer that is maybe a little bit more authentic. Not to say that we've been inauthentic, but I've read a lot of articles about this actually that say, don't just say everything's fine. It's not to say, oh, I'm horrible, but people are tending to be a little more transparent right now. And so that's part of what I'm here to share with you today is the idea that as we are networking and connecting with people and trying to make connections and move forward in our professional lives, people are connecting on a somewhat different level at this point. And so the questions that we normally ask people in passing or as a matter of politeness, like the ones that are on the screen here, they've taken on a little bit of a different meaning right now. So these are some of the keys that I think are really important to successful networking. And this is a slide actually that comes out of my what I would call air quotes normal networking presentation. It applies right now, but there are some distinctions that I would say apply to this particular time. So I'm going to go into more depth on each of these. Your state of mind. Right now, we are all existing in somewhat of a different state of mind. Even though we may still feel like we are being ourselves, we cannot or could not have been changed by what's going on right now. And so that has impacted the way we interact with one another, the way we relate to people, the way we see ourselves in the world. So we have to be aware of ourselves, who we are, and our state of mind as we go forward. If you are somebody who has been recently laid off as a result of the virus, or you're thinking about some type of transition. Maybe this virus or the pandemic propelled you into thinking twice about how you've been spending your time in your life, things like that. It's changed maybe your state of mind. So we want to delve into that more. We also want to talk about what resources are available to you for networking. A lot of people that I encounter when we talk about networking, our first conversation about it, they think kind of narrowly about what that entails. So I want to give you a kind of some broad brushstrokes about what your resources could be for that, even while we are still somewhat locked down, even though things are starting to open up. Um, Even while things are opening up, they're still going to be somewhat limited. And I am going to go into some depth towards the end about LinkedIn, because I think LinkedIn is so important right now. And then knowing yourself and playing to your strengths is so very, very important in terms of being a successful networker and connector. And that also ties in with making a difference. So using your strengths to make a difference really can make you a very effective networker. I'm going to explain all of this a lot more. So, your state of mind. The first thing that is going to serve you very, very well in terms of engaging in making good connections and contacts and getting the information you need through networking is to stay open and curious, reminding yourself to stay as open and curious as possible. So I have this image here of a person with a parachute. You know, a parachute is only as good as when it's open, right? Same thing with your mind. Um, the next thing that is very important to an open mind is dealing with your committee. And what I mean by your committee is most of us, very few of us don't have a committee. I'd say most of us do have a committee in our heads. So there's the committee, there's different committee members in your heads. So there's the committee member in your head that says, I'm too old. I don't have enough of these skills. I can't do this. I'm overqualified. I'm underqualified. I look like this. I don't look like that. What will they say about me? These are a lot of things that run in our heads. Maybe some of these are messages that were given to us when we were a child. Maybe these are messages that a boss gave to us, or a teacher, or somebody in our lives. Maybe they're things we made up in our own heads. Sometimes it's something that somebody planted in our heads once and it stuck with us. And all they are thoughts. They're negative thoughts, and they run us. They run us. They run our behavior, and they hold us back. Another way to talk about your committee would be to refer to it as, negative thoughts. We all have them. The key with the committee is to be aware that it exists. And then once you are aware that it is running you or running your behavior or holding you back, is to notice that it's there, simply notice it without judgment, and then dismiss it. It will come back. Most of us have it most of our lives. There's a great book that really helps you with some strategies for dealing with this. It's called Taming Your Gremlin. It's by an author named Richard Carson. He's a psychologist.
Is that Carson with a K or a C,
With a
Tammy?
C, like Johnny Carson, yeah.
Taming Your Gremlins?
For those of us who know who Johnny Carson is.
It's called
Yes,
Taming Your
Richard
Gremlins.
Carson, Taming Your Gremlin.
Okay, I'm putting this in the chat box just so
Great.
we remember. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. So, so yeah, so another term for these little voices in your head that, and they're very subconscious and sneaky. They run like an endless tape that just keeps repeating. Um, and they're very natural. They just keep showing up. So some people will call them their baseball team. You know, it's like I have a whole team of gremlins running. So remember that your committee can get very powerful and it can really get in the way. Another part of your state of mind, and this one's really important, is if you can remember as you're going about your process of networking to say to yourself, it's not about me. And now here on the slide, it says it's not about you because I'm speaking to you. It's not about you. Now you'd say, wait a minute, but I'm networking so that I can get my next job, get information I need to learn about a company or an opening, or maybe I'm trying to learn about a new field of work. That's true. You are trying to help yourself by going through this process. And I'm not saying that it's really not about you, but if you hold in your mind that it's not about you and you focus on the people that you're interacting with and try to learn as much about them and try to do as much as you can to help them in some way or be of service to them, you will get everything that you need out of those relationships, because that's really what networking is. It's relationship building. And so the more that you make it not about you, and it's not to say that if someone says to you, how can I help you? And you say, oh, no, no, it's not about me. No, I don't mean it like quite that extreme, but we're talking about state of mind here. We're going to go into this more, but I just wanted to plant that seed that it is a mindset. And then the other mindset is gratitude. You can't be grateful enough in these situations. Sending people a thank you note for talking to you, even if they've talked to you more than once, sending them a quick note again. Or if somebody referred you to somebody else, sending a follow-up note to the person who made the referral and say, hey, I just had a great chat with Joe. Thank you so much for making that introduction. And it's amazing how when you follow up and follow through with quick thank yous, people remember that. There are other nice ways to thank people as well. So especially right now, while we're all kind of isolated, if somebody's done you a favor, or you're trying to get a hold of somebody and maybe it's been kind of challenging, you know, pop a $5 Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts card in the mail to them and say, hey, I wish we could meet in person for coffee, but let's go treat yourself to a cup of coffee and on me, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
I mean,
So
Tim, I have a question. I feel like what you're describing makes it so that if you keep putting yourself in front of others, that when an opportunity arises or another connection that they might make for you comes to them, that they would then be thinking of you because it
right.
wasn't a one and done situation.
Exactly. I mean, this is all about relationship building. It's not one and done. Um, and it's not one and done once you land a job. This is the mistake that I've seen people make over and over and over again, especially people in our generation. And when I say our generation, I'm talking about those of us who might be baby boomers, or um, I always forget what the generation is, right? Just younger than us.
I think it's Gen
Gen
X.
Gen X. Okay. So I'm right. I'm kind of right on the cusp, but I am a baby boomer. So Gen Xers and baby boomers, we come from a time when you would, maybe do a little networking and land a job. And we come from a time where we used to, put, 50 resumes in envelopes and send them out. And we could land a job that way. Gone are those days, right? So it's really important, though, to keep your network alive. It doesn't mean that you need to be sending thank you notes constantly or doing nice things for people constantly. I'm not talking about that. But there is something to be said for, and we have the tools available to us to do these things. So it's really important to stay in touch with people. And there are some ways. I think LinkedIn is one tool that's a great way to do that. And so it's just very, very important to keep, some subsection of your network alive, even once you land somewhere. So I like to think of networking as if it's a research project. And I actually got this context from Ellen's husband. I was having a great conversation with him one day, and he said to me, "You know what networking is? It's a research project." And he's right. He's absolutely right. Networking, because I always have said to people, networking really isn't about the people itself. It's about getting information. So if you can remember that it's not about you, it's about the information. You're trying to get information. You're trying to get information about companies, about different types of functional roles, about company culture, what's going on in the marketplace, what might be going on in a particular, professional association, what maybe is going on with the leadership in a particular organization, all kinds of information. Maybe you're trying to get information about whether or not to go to a particular conference. Well, at least not right now, but well, maybe there are virtual conferences. So again, when you put it in the context in your state of mind that networking is a research project, it's like think of everyone you connect with as if they're a reference librarian, since we are here through the library. That's really what it's about. Again, when you almost take yourself out of the equation a little bit and say, oh, I'm just trying to get information, it makes it a little easier sometimes to approach somebody, but especially if it's somebody that you don't know very well, or someone, let's say, that you haven't talked to in a while, and maybe you're feeling a little perhaps sheepish, like, oh, I haven't talked to them in a while. Um, you know, will they be mad that I haven't, been in touch in a while? Because I hear that a lot from people. So think of it as a research project. So speaking of objections and obstacles, or the committee that fills our heads, these are just some frequent objections and obstacles that I hear from a lot of my clients and people I speak with. I don't know where to go or what to say. Where do I network? I don't like large events, or I had a bad or uncomfortable experience in the past, or, right now we've got a ton of people out there who've never been unemployed. I've never had to do this before. I was in the same job, for the last, 20, 30 years, or I have been in the same field for the last 20, 30 years. And I basically went from job to job to job, having been referred through to each job. And I've never really had to look for my next role. What people don't realize when they've been able to get their jobs that way is that that's actually networking. Or people who identify as introverts, and maybe, a lot of introverts don't like small talk, and they think of networking as, having to make a lot of small talk. Or maybe they identify as somebody who is introverted and doesn't like having to make conversation with people they don't know very well. Other people feel like they are imposing or asking for favors. Well, the way that I try to frame this for people, again, we're still in this sort of frame of mind, is to say, if somebody you know, whether how well you know them or don't know them at all, or they're referred to you through someone you know, if they approached you and said, I'm in the process of looking around. I need some information, or I'm curious about your background, or would like to learn more about what you've been up to, or, what you did at this company or that organization. Would you mind giving me 20 minutes on the phone to tell me about your experience? What would you say? Probably you'd say you'd be happy to speak with them, right?
I mean,
So
Tammy, I've been in many situations at the library where people have asked me who are interested in the type of work that I do. And I always say yes, because if we have a generous mindset and we know that, somebody is genuinely curious and interested in what we do, that's a compliment to the person.
I agree. And I think people like to be asked. People actually, especially one on one, they usually are a little flattered that somebody referred them and said, "Oh, this person thought that I would be a good person to talk to." That's a good thing.
Right.
So
It is a compliment.
it is. So I think that we have to, again, make it not about us for the moment and realize that if we put ourselves in the other person's shoes for the moment, we realize they're generally very happy to speak with us. And in the case of, for example, let's say it's an old coworker you haven't talked to in 10 years. Some people would say, "Oh, well, I haven't talked to them in 10 years. They'll probably be insulted. I haven't been in touch with them." What I always say to that is, well, first of all, they haven't been in touch with you in 10 years either, you know? And, chances are you reach out to them and they're going to be really happy that you thought of them. And chances are you've both been busy with your lives, whatever it is, maybe raising a family, maybe there's been other things going on in your lives that just took over. It doesn't really matter. The fact is, in this moment, right here and now, you thought of each other, or one of you thought of the other one, and you reconnected. People generally enjoy that. And they enjoy that you want to tap into them for a little bit of advice more often than not. And you're not asking for a lot. You're saying, "Hey, could we grab 20 minutes on the phone?" That's it, you know? So, this is one of those things with all these obstacles and objections where I say, try to walk in their shoes as if it was you being approached, and that will help you to kind of dismiss the committee and step into what you need to step into in order to get the information that you need, because these connections are really going to be very, very helpful. So again, in the vein of it's not about you, and this again, it's a mindset. This is what helps to clear the path and free you up to really move more freely into the process. So, cultivating new connections regularly. We're going to talk about LinkedIn as being a great place to do that. Redevelop existing relationships. So, take a look around, depending on what tools you have available to you. I've definitely reconnected with people I went to high school with. My podcast has been a great way to do that, actually. I've noticed, for example, on Facebook, that some of the people that I grew up with, who I wasn't even really that friendly with, have had some very interesting professional lives. And so I've reached out to some of them and said, "Would you be willing to be a guest on my podcast?" And I've actually made some lovely connections with some of them now. And as adults, we actually have become, acquaintances, or kind of friendly in ways we never would have otherwise. So it's been really delightful. Um, And then I think the other thing that's really a wonderful thing to do is connecting people to each other. And just the act of being a connector can help you to build your network. So, knowing that certain people can benefit from knowing one another is a great activity. Again, not about you, but it does help you to build your network when you introduce other people to one another. It helps you to stay on their radar, and they'll remember that you introduced them to someone else who was helpful to them, and they'll remember you in a variety of contexts. And I love this phrase, be interested, not interesting. A lot of times when we are networking, we're so busy trying to prove ourselves or show up in a certain way, especially if we're networking with somebody, let's say, who's inside a company that we want to that we might want to work in, and we're trying to show up and look like we could work there, and we want to, it almost as if we're doing a practice interview with them. And I would say just show your interest, just be genuinely interested in them and what they do or what's going on in the company. And ask great questions. When you ask great questions, people remember that. So one of my tips about asking great questions is to ask questions that don't elicit a yes or no answer. So you might, one of my best tips about questions is when someone's, let's say you ask somebody about, well, what is it like to work, at such and such an organization? And they say, oh, well, it's really great. Every Friday we have, a happy hour, or every Friday we have, a free lunch. Oh, well, you might just say, well, tell me more. What happens, at those lunches? Do people congregate, or, tell me more. Just if you just say, tell me more, you show an interest, they can tell you a little more about it. And then you can come up with follow-up questions. So tell me more doesn't sound like a question, but it actually is. So helping others to get what they want first. So as you're talking to somebody or listening is actually a better thing to do. Read between the lines or listen to what they want, listen to what their interests are. So, make a few notes. And the more you listen and see what are their interests, or perhaps you'll learn something about even an outside interest of theirs. So as you're going about your daily life, let's say you come across something that makes you think of them. You might, send them a little note, after you've spoken with them, and say, oh, I just came across this article or this announcement about this thing that I thought you might be interested in. I just wanted to share it with you in case you hadn't heard about it. People love that kind of thing. So that's what comes under the category of small, sincere, genuine acts that go a long way. People remember that you thought of them in that way. So playing to your strengths. We just talked about this a little bit. Active listening. Active listening means that you really are putting yourself in someone else's shoes. You are listening to what their experience is, how they've been engaged in their own work life, whether it's asking them about a past workplace they've worked in or where they're working now, or what they are noticing is going on in their industry or their field, or what other advice they might offer you. If you're asking people for names of other people they might recommend that you speak with, you might ask certain kinds of questions that also are reflective of active listening, like, oh, so tell me more about why you're recommending that I speak to this person, or what would you recommend what would be the best way for me to get in touch with this person, or would it be okay if I circle back to you at a later date? So you're showing that you're actively listening to them, but you're also being respectful of their time. Always research and prepare and plan. So when you know that you have an appointment to speak with somebody, do your due diligence. It's okay that they know that you looked at their LinkedIn profile. Check out any other information you can find out about them. And in your conversation with them, it's okay to let them know that you've done your research and that you know something about them. I'm always impressed when I have a conversation with somebody and they start asking me questions about something I've done in the past, that they know things about me. Sometimes it almost takes me aback a little bit, like, ooh, they snuck around and found things out about me. But I realize they're prepared. They're prepared. They came ready. They're ready to make the best use of my time with me. And that way they make the best use by already having information so they can probe a little deeper in terms of getting the most out of our conversation. And by doing so, they're demonstrating a commitment to really having good knowledge rather than just skimming the surface with small talk. The other thing that's also important is during this process, if you are committed full time to a job search right now, plan for downtime. Even though everybody says a job search is a full-time job, yes, it is, downtime is equally as important. Make sure that you really give yourself real breaks, even if this is really on your mind and it's really, weighing on you. Taking breaks will actually add to your energy to pursue the process further. I can't say that enough. And, in terms of networking versus groups, right now, of course, we're not really networking in groups in the same way. People are, but there are virtual groups. If you're the kind of person who prefers one-on-one networking, then do it. Don't go to big networking groups. Even if it's on Zoom and you don't like that, don't do it. I think a lot of people feel compelled that they have to, go to the job seeker groups or the, networking groups. And I say, if that doesn't work for you, you don't have to do that. Or you can go to them, maybe some of the job seeker groups are run in such a way that you can sit and be an observer. But there's no book of rules about how you have to go about this. And I always like to talk to people about the power of one. You're one person. Take one step at a time. Chip away at it. You're looking for one situation. Because I think sometimes when we are looking for our next job or our next role, it can get very overwhelming. There's a whole, pile of things that you have to do to really be a great job candidate and to look for the right role. There's a lot of tasks in front of you, and it can get overwhelming, but you really have to train your mind to realize that you're just one person trying to do one thing. And I offer this as an example, reflecting on an exercise I call defining moments. It's not really, it's a touch point. And that is, if you think about an experience in your past where perhaps you went, well, I'll give you an example, actually. A defining moment in my life. I went to a party, and somewhere along the way, someone asked me, how's coaching going? And Ellen was at the party, and I didn't know her at all. And she was across the room, and she overheard me talking about coaching. And she came across the room and she said to me, you're a coach? Oh, I'm very curious to hear more about your coaching. Tell me more. And the rest is history.
And I have to say that was a very, very valuable conversation. For those that are in the room with us, I didn't even know what a career coach was at that time. I thought she coached women's soccer or something like that. So
Yeah,
I'm
no.
being very honest here. And, that has yielded not only a professional working relationship, but also a very warm friendship. So,
Right.
and was a very, very beneficial natural question that I just asked because I was curious.
Exactly. And so that was a defining moment for both of us because we've both benefited tremendously. Now,
Yes.
if either one or the other one of us hadn't gone to that party on that day through a mutual friend, we may not be sitting here right now with you. So that was a defining moment. And so that's my point, is that every time you make a decision whether or not to have a conversation with somebody, whether or not maybe to attend a particular networking event, or every time you have a decision point about whether or not to engage in an opportunity, just remember, anytime those could be a defining moment. The next choice you make could be the one. Now, I'm not saying to make yourself crazy and go to everything and say yes to everything, because that could be the one. But I do want you to just remember that parachute and stay open and curious to all those potential defining moments.
Tammy, can I put something out there? Because I imagine for some people, it's very overwhelming, even with the great information that you're giving us, as what is this whole networking thing? And I would like to share that the last two jobs I got, including the one that I have now, I got them because I talked to my friends and let them know that I was looking for a
Mhm.
job. So if you're overwhelmed about, how do you feel about that idea, Tammy? The idea of being overwhelmed, and the simple first step is telling your friends that you're looking for a job. Because the last two jobs I got came to me from friends saying to me, hey, I think this might be a good fit for you. I work at this place, and maybe, or this job that I have now at the library, my friend was a librarian somewhere else. And she saw it on a closed network that people on the outside of the library world would not have seen. And she said, I think you should apply for this job. So,
It's a great, it's, but that again is it's a defining moment, right? That is, you had to be open to that, right?
right. Well, I'm trying to be, speaking to the others that are in the room and saying, from my perspective, networking can be as simple as starting with your friends, telling
Absolutely.
them that you're looking for work.
Right. And how often I think that sometimes people forget some of the obvious things, like telling their friends they're looking, right?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I would say about that is a first step, but that shouldn't be your only step.
Hmm.
And I have to emphasize that, because um, that that worked out great for you. And I would say that more often than not, people need to do a whole lot more than that in this. I mean, not just in this day and age. I would have said this even, 10 years ago, that the odds, if we're being statistical about it, your odds are a whole lot better if you are, um, telling more than just, your friends that you're looking. But,
Absolutely.
but yet what you're pointing out is an excellent example of how um that people who knew you well enough knew that that job would be a good fit for you, and it was in the hidden job market. Because I think people find the hidden job market to be so mysterious, when in fact the only way you're going to find the hidden job market is by talking to people and letting people get to know you. So here are some other ways to let people in and get to know you in a more, let's say, organic or natural way, um, so that you're not necessarily just asking people for their time or putting yourself out there in a way where you are, trying to engage in conversations, but perhaps you're just trying to make a difference out there. Maybe you're doing some volunteer work. Maybe you serve on a board of directors. Maybe you are engaged in committee work, maybe through a congregation that you're a part of, social action work, just something that you find yourself wanting to do naturally to make a difference in the world. Those are the kinds of things where you develop a relationship or a rapport with people that you might not otherwise in a more relaxed or natural way. And, it might come up in conversation that you're in the process of looking for your next opportunity. And you just never know who you're standing next to while you are, I don't know, packing those boxes of food for the food bank or whatever it is that you're doing, to to help out. And next thing you know, someone might say, I just talked to someone yesterday who has an opening. So, defining moments. So I'm gonna go over this somewhat quickly, but so this is sort of an overview of resources. So we just talked about this a little bit, personal and professional connections. I think, we just talked about friends as being a great resource. The other resource that people, I think, often overlook are family members. For example, family members such as cousins, aunts, uncles, people in other cities. Depending on the kind of work you're looking for, we live in a global world now. People are connected all over the place. And even if you are looking for a job locally, you can network with people all over the place because they may know people locally that you don't know, or they may know people who work for a company that has offices here who might be hiring. So I might have a cousin in Michigan who happened to have gone to college with somebody who happens to work for an organization I'm interested in Boston. But I won't know that unless I talk to my cousin in Michigan. And I've seen people get jobs that way, where they just, pick up the phone and call a relative they haven't talked to in a while. But I think sometimes we don't think of those people as networking. We just, we just don't connect those dots. When it comes to professional connections, I think people more naturally will get in touch with, past colleagues or colleagues they've worked with more recently. I think that comes more naturally. But I think it's a wider range of personal connections that people don't think about, or even like talking to a next door neighbor. People don't always think about that. Groups and associations, another very rich resource for making connections, getting the information you need. I just want to remind you that what you're trying to do is get information. It's not always about job openings. It could be about learning about those organizations or different types of roles that might appeal to you. So groups and associations can be everything from professional associations to industry groups, to regional groups, to alumni associations that can offer you databases or other connections with alumni who might be in your field or who are locally. Maybe there's even a local alumni group that meets regularly. I have found that I went to grad school at Boston University. They have an amazing alumni organization that does all kinds of things for their alumni. Some of the alumni offices even have dedicated career coaches on staff. So there's tremendous amount of resources at the universities as well. Then again, there's also chambers of commerce can be a great resource even for individual job seekers. So there's just lots of places to look. I also suggest that people get involved in groups on LinkedIn. Another resource is situational resources, like the one I just described, the situation I was in with Ellen. We went to a party. We met each other that way. I've met people just by sitting in a Starbucks and talking to somebody. And next thing I know, somebody is tapping me on the shoulder. They overheard my conversation. I talk too loud sometimes. And someone will tap me on the shoulder and say, "Oh, can I have your card? I liked what I heard you saying." I've had that happen more than once, actually. Um, so, there's lots of different ways that there are resources there that you didn't even know were there. Reading newspapers, online blogs, tons of great blogs. I should have added podcasts, trade publications, a lot of professional publications. I think of things like I personally like Harvard Business Review, has a lot of great articles, and Boston Business Journal is a great publication, gives a lot of information about new and emerging companies and things that are going on. So really current information. And then of course the internet and social media are tremendous resources. I think things like Twitter, people don't realize that companies post things on Twitter all the time about openings that they have. Okay, let's dive in here a little bit. How are we doing on time?
It's about 5 of 11.
Okay. All right. So LinkedIn, some of the information I'm giving you here is hot off the presses. I have a colleague who is a tech person out in Silicon Valley, and he just read some articles about the latest algorithms on LinkedIn, and he gave me a synopsis of what makes for the most effective visibility on LinkedIn. And this was aimed at some of us who are more, sort of in the entrepreneurial sphere, but this applies equally to anybody who is trying to get noticed on LinkedIn.
Sorry, Tim,
And
I just want to say one of our participants has to leave at 11. She has a hard stop.
okay,
I just put your email address in the chat for her, please. She won't be here for the last slide. What is it?
okay.
Ruler Lobe.
Tammy at tammygoolerlobe.com.
Thank you. There you go.
Okay. Well, before she goes, let me say one thing that's really key. So the area under your name in your profile there, you can see that I circled it. It's called the headline. It's keyword sensitive. So if you are somebody who's hoping to get noticed by recruiters, make sure that the words that are underneath your name there really capture who you are professionally. So if you are working currently, don't just put your job title and company name there. Don't just put a job title. Put a number of good descriptive words that describe who you are as a professional, as you see I've done. Because that's how I need to be found. That's how you need to be found if somebody's going to be looking to potentially hire you. That area, that headline area under your name is highly keyword sensitive. That's the recruiters who buy the recruitment packages on LinkedIn. That's the main area, first and foremost, that will be picked up. So that's very important. Couple of other things. If you want also to continue to show up in people's searches or to be noticed, interaction is very, very important on LinkedIn. That doesn't mean you have to be on there all the time. This is not Facebook, but interaction is important. So if someone puts up a post and you want to make a comment on that post, go for it. Don't just like it. Don't just hit the little thumbs up. That doesn't do you any good. So you can like it, but go ahead and make a comment. Very important. You also, if you're going to add content to LinkedIn, you have the option to add a post or to post an article. And what I mean by posting an article is you can post an article of your own, which can also look like a post. I do both, but the posts are more effective. So you go into the home screen of LinkedIn, add a post, whether it's, you can share an article within a post. It could be a link to an interesting article. That's fine. Or you can write a post about something that you think is important.
Are hashtags important on LinkedIn too?
Yes, but only 3.
3.
If you go more than 3, you're kind of putting out the fire. And you want to make sure that your profile has an all-star rating, because that's going to move you up the list. Now, if you want to know what it would take to get an all-star rating, you can do some searching and find out what that entails, or we can do a whole nother training on that. But comments are effective. And then if somebody responds to your comments, it also is effective for you to respond to that by thanking them, or just doing a response to anyone who comments on your comments. So this is, again, all what I'm hearing the latest is in terms of what the algorithm picks up. And the point of this is that your network will see this activity. This is how things get picked up, so that you stay visible on LinkedIn, so that people get to see who you are. Now, this is another cool thing. So there's something called the Social Selling Index on LinkedIn. I just discovered this, and the next 2 slides are going to show you what this looks like. So there are 4 areas for the Social Selling Index. Now, this sounds like you're trying to sell yourself, but what it really does is it gives you 4 measures by which you can look at how you're showing up on LinkedIn. And any employer, the first thing they're going to do after they get your resume is they're going to check you out on LinkedIn. So what you want to be able to do is you want to show up as best as you can on LinkedIn. So the 4 measures that this tool, and the next slide will show you the link where you can look up your own social selling index. So I have a score of 74, which is actually pretty good. It helps you to establish your professional brand. It helps you look at how you find the right people, how you're engaging with insights, and how you're building relationships. So the bottom, that green line at the bottom, I'm off the chart on building relationships. That's because I have over 4,000 connections on LinkedIn. There are some other areas there where you can see where my colored lines don't go all the way to the edge, which means I've got some things to work on. Now, I can't show you on this because this is just a screenshot of the index, but on the actual index, if I was to click on each of these areas right here, it gives me some tips and guidelines on how I can improve those areas. So, some of you may or may not care about this, but for an entrepreneur like me, this is very important. But it's also important, I think, for job seekers, because I believe that job seekers and anyone who's trying to build their career or move their career forward should be entrepreneurial in their own career in this day and age. The only one who's going to move your career forward is you. And so it's important that a tool like LinkedIn is key in making sure that you have a certain kind of interaction and visibility, and are known in a certain way. And I say this because if you think about it, I'm going to go to the next slide here that shows you the
Tammy,
other.
before you start on the next slide, unfortunately, a couple of the attendees had to go, and
Okay.
our last attendee, Mary, also has to leave. Mary is asking if we could do a follow-up session on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So maybe you and I can talk about that offline.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you have any closing words for Mary. She's, as I say, the others have had to leave, and Mary also has to go. She has another 11 o'clock
Okay.
session. This has been wonderful. We've got
Okay.
some great chat, comments in the chat about the valuable
Sure.
information you put forward.
Okay. So are we done?
I would say maybe one closing comment for Mary, and then I think we can sign off.
Okay. Well, I did have a few resources I wanted to share with people that I thought would be useful. And we are recording this, so this can be passed on to people. Actually, for the recording, though, I do want people to see how you get your LinkedIn SSI, how you get your social selling index. So there's the link for that, if people want to get that. And I recommend that people subscribe to the newsletter job-hunt.org, because that gives you a lot of really good cutting edge information on networking and job hunting, especially during COVID. I also highly recommend the podcast Find Your Dream Job, because even though it sounds dreamy, it is incredibly practical. A lot of very practical advice, lots of COVID related content on that podcast. So I wanted to suggest that. And a final comment. They may never forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Beautiful, Tammy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I always have too much to say.
Yeah, so why don't you stop the recording, and maybe you and I can then chat a little bit. Okay.